going to be co-presenting this webinar today with my colleague Michael Bach, who is the Manager of Early Childhood Accountability at the Department of Education. And we're going to be talking through with you all today the release of the 2019-2020 performance profiles and how that will look slightly different than it has in previous years as a result of COVID-19. So we can go on to the next slide. So this is our agenda for the webinar today. We are going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning grounding ourselves in the vision for early childhood in Louisiana and the Act 3 implementation timeline. We're going to talk about the performance profile release. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the 2019-2020 performance profile results from this year and look at some of the data. We're going to talk about how directors and lead agencies across the state can support improvement in classrooms. Then we're going to end with updates, next steps, and an announcement about the Louisiana Child Care Parent Poll. I am seeing that the chat has been disabled, but actually if we could turn the chat to maybe just direct it to the host, that would be great. Now it looks like that is working. So if you have questions along the way, we will be processing those questions and hopefully we'll respond to your questions at the end. However, if you have questions that we're not able to respond to, we will try to address those questions in writing after the fact. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the Louisiana Early Childhood Vision. Really, the foundation of our work in early childhood in Louisiana is hinged on the fact that we have a unified early childhood system. So our system in Louisiana is unique in that at the community level and the state level, it is fully unified, which means that child care centers, Head Starts, early Head Starts, and school-based pre-K programs are coordinated by the same entities at the local and state level. And all of those programs are rated using the same tools and indicators in our unified quality rating system. These are the four big priorities of our unified early childhood system. First and foremost, our biggest priority and our biggest challenge in Louisiana is around expanded access. So we are really striving for the reality that one day all children will have the opportunity to access a high quality early learning program that will prepare them for kindergarten. Next is prepared teachers, that every classroom in the state has a prepared teacher who's equipped with the knowledge and skills and tools to promote child development and prepare kids for kindergarten. That in those classrooms, there are high quality interactions happening. And lastly, that teachers have access to the instructional tools that will make them successful and enable high quality interactions to happen. You can go on to the next slide. So I won't spend too much time on this, but I did want to kind of ground us in the timeline of the Act 3 implementation. So as many of you know on the call today, much of our work in early childhood in Louisiana has changed since 2012 with the passage of Act 3 and its subsequent implementation. So as early as 2013, 2014, we really started to see Act 3 be implemented with the beginning of the Early Childhood Community Network model happening through a relatively small pilot of 13 networks. That was scaled over the course of multiple years. And in 2015, 2016, there was a community network in every community in the state. That was also the year that we achieved statewide implementation of the Unified Quality Rating System for a practice year. The following year was the first real year of results from the Unified Quality Rating System in 2016, 2017. Those were published in the fall of 2017. And then jumping forward a couple years, another highlight that I want to make sure I hit on is that last year in the 2019-2020 year, for the first time, all infant classrooms in the state were observed and fully incorporated into the observations that took place last year, although that will just be a practice year for infant. And beginning this fall, in fall of 2020, infant is fully incorporated into the Unified Quality Rating System, and moving forward, results from infant class observations will be fully integrated into sites' performance profiles. You can move on to the next slide. So a little bit about how this year will look and feel different. And by now, I suspect this is not news to most of you all, since you've seen this in the newsletter and in other webinars where we've spoken about this in the past. But we do want to acknowledge that we understand that last year, the 2019-2020 academic year, was strange and disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so although all of the observations were conducted in the fall semester, many of the scheduled class observations for spring did not happen as a result of the governor's stay-at-home order that went into effect on March 22nd of this year. As a result of that, we have implemented a hold harmless approach for the performance profiles published tomorrow, the 2019-2020 performance profiles. And this approach both honors improvements that were made by sites in 2019-2020, but also does not penalize sites that were not on track for improvement in 2019-2020, and allows sites to continue to access the much needed tax credits and bonus payments that we know so many centers across the state rely on. So the way that we've done this hold harmless approach is that sites that had a higher 2019-2020 performance score based on the observations that were conducted during the 2019-2020 year were given the opportunity to opt in to receiving an updated performance profile based on those 2019-2020 results. So for those of you directors and sites that did have a higher 2019-2020 performance score, you were given the opportunity to complete an opt-in survey, and your results tomorrow will reflect a higher score based on 2019-2020 class observations. For other sites, the department is not going to be releasing an updated 2019-2020 performance profile. So if you fall into the second category of sites, your performance rating and performance score published on louisianaschools.com will be the same. So we're going to be extending your results from the 2018-2019 year for an additional year. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. So just some key accomplishments from this past year, the 2019-2020 year. We do want to recognize all of the hard work that went into carrying out the observations that did take place. So I just want to call out a couple key accomplishments. So in the 2019-2020 year, more than 12,500 observations were conducted across nearly 5,000 classrooms and 1,558 sites. And looking at these data, although it is not a complete picture because the class observations for spring were not completed in many cases, but looking at the data that we do have from the 2019-2020 year, we're seeing improvement essentially across the board. And yet we know there are still too few young children who can access publicly funded high quality early childhood programs. And now I think I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mike Bach, who's going to walk us through the next few slides.
Thanks so much, Taylor. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to dive into some of the nuts and bolts of this year's performance profile release. As many of you already know, the early childhood performance profiles include measures of classroom quality based on the class rating tool to inform and support the core elements necessary for early childhood classroom quality. This is a research tool. It's based nationally. And is nationally regarded as an early childhood quality measure for young children that assesses how well teachers and children interact in a classroom. The chart below provides more information about the core expectations for classrooms at the heart of the class tool, as well as the specific domains that are used in the pre-K, toddler, and infant tools for observations of classroom quality. For those of you who are particularly attuned to how this tool's been used in Louisiana, you'll know that in 2019-2020, we completed this learning year for infant class that Taylor talked about, where every infant classroom in Louisiana received observations using the class tool. And in this coming school year, we'll incorporate that more fully into performance profiles. In addition to the information about the quality of publicly funded sites gathered through class observations across the state, performance profiles also provide information about best practices. So for each site, performance profile results published on louisianaschools.com contain two major components. The performance rating, which is based on class observations of child-adult interactions, is one of the two major components. The other major component published is informational metrics that report on the use of best practices such as curriculum, assessments, and teacher credentials. These two components are the bedrock of Louisiana's unified rating system, which measures the core elements research indicate are needed for positive child outcomes. The unified rating system also provides a clear and focused path to improvement and gives families a way to compare choices in their community. Beyond publishing the profiles, the department provides sites with incentives and supports around class scores. Tax incentives and bonuses for childcare centers are aligned to performance ratings to reward and incentivize performance improvement. Additionally, programs that score below 3.75 are required to participate in a year-long site improvement planning process that provides coaching and support. And finally, programs that score unsatisfactory for 2 years in any 3-year period may lose Type 3 licensing or funding. I think it's really important before we dive into some results from the previous year to take a look at the way most folks across the state interact with performance profiles, which is the Louisiana School and Center Finder. Like previous years, performance profiles will be published on the Louisiana School and Center Finder, which is accessible to anyone at www.louisianaschools.com. The School and Center Finder provides two main ways that families can find information about early childhood sites. The first is through the search feature on the right side, where anyone can look up a performance profile for any site. Additionally, the School and Center Finder provides a map browsing view that allows users to explore the options geographically. This can be incredibly useful to families who might want to compare options close to home or to work. For each site, the performance profile provides two tabs of information. The first tab is titled About Our School and provides general information like phone number, address, hours of operation. The second tab is called Academic Performance and provides the performance profile that can be visible online, as well as a PDF that can be downloaded and printed. The performance profile, as you can see on the screenshot here, the top part provides the site's performance rating, as well as the performance score that informs the performance rating. Additionally, if you keep scrolling down through the academic performance tab, you'll see that it also contains the informational metrics mentioned earlier about best practices such as assessments, classroom ratios, curriculum quality, and teacher credentials. For performance profiles published this year, as Taylor mentioned earlier, these performance profiles are subject to the department's hold harmless approach. And so in order to make sure that there's clarity around this report, new this year will be a header and a banner on each performance profile that explains the approach that Taylor outlined earlier. Additionally, as a result of COVID-19, domain level results on the class tool were not calculated for 2019-2020, and school funder is going to continue to reflect the domain results from 2018-2019. In addition to being useful to inform family choice and provide information about sites statewide through School Finder, the results reflected in performance profiles are also useful to explore trends statewide in the quality of early childhood education that Louisiana children experience. And so to dive in a little bit here, you'll see that this year nearly 92% of sites will receive a rating of proficient or higher in the state's unified quality rating system. Over time, the number of sites in the unsatisfactory rating, as well as in the approaching proficient rating, have declined steadily. And you'll see that the number of sites that are rated high, proficient, or excellent have increased steadily each year. These ratings are based on class observations and are, it's worth noting that these designations reflect the department's hold harmless approach, where sites with higher 2019-2020 scores could opt into having those scores published, and the department extended 2018-2019 scores and ratings for all other sites. So in order to provide some more insight into trends in class scores over time, the graph on this page compares the overall averages as well as domain averages. This graph shows results based on annual results from 2016, 2017, 2017, 2018, 2018, 2019, as well as the fall results from the most recent school year. The reason for this comparison is that, as Taylor mentioned, class observation in the spring experienced a lot of disruptions as a result of COVID-19. And so the observations in the fall, which did not, provided we can be a little bit more confident that those observations provide a picture of increasing classroom quality across the state. You'll see that across the state, the average overall score and the average domain scores on each class domain have increased incrementally and steadily every year. And it can also be informative when looking at this data to explore trends by provider type in addition to statewide results. Although many sites have multiple programs, each site is assigned a type based on how it's set up and funded. And so you can see that publicly funded sites are categorized as schools, early or Head Start sites, or as childcare centers. And the table on this slide provides a little bit more information about what each site type denotes. I'm not going to go into all of the details about this here, but this will be publicly available if you'd like to come back and review that. Similar to the statewide data, you can see that when results from fall 2019 are compared year over year to results, there is steady and incremental growth in all site types over time. With any rating tool, scores can change from year to year, and so it's probably worth diving into what those changes look like across the state. The table on this slide provides more information on the distribution of changes in sites' scores, and you can see that for sites that have both fall 2018 and fall 2019 data, 571 saw a decline in their average score between that period, and 923 saw an improvement. I think it's also really important to pay attention to sort of the outer bands on this slide and highlight that while 42 site scores declined by 1 or more points, 82 sites scores improved by 1 or more points. As I mentioned earlier, performance profiles also include information about the implementation of best practices. And as you can see from the chart below of the distribution of sites that have achieved the highest star rating associated with assessment, curriculum, classroom ratio, and Louisiana certification, you'll see that sites vary in their implementation of these best practices, but across the board, the large majority of programs use high quality curriculum and assessment practices. As a result of the disruptions that occurred with class observations from COVID-19, the department will be extending the 2018-2019 community network profiles. Because of how many sites experienced fluctuations of more than 25% in attendance or were not operational for 18 or more consecutive like school days. Every community network meets the qualifications to be designated as severe impact networks. And that's the approach the department is going to take this year and extend 2018-2019 community network profiles. In addition to the data typically included in performance profiles, I think it's also worth talking about the infant class data because while this past year was a learning year, in the coming year, this data will be incorporated more fully into sites' performance profiles. We know that teachers in infant classrooms need high quality feedback and support to grow and to increase the quality of infant care and provide a pathway to improvement. Louisiana is adding infant class to the state's quality rating and improvement system. You'll see that we are entering into the final year of the 3-year implementation period. We're wrapping up the infant class learning year where all infant classrooms were observed and are moving into a year where infant class will not only be observed, infant classrooms will not only be observed, but also that performance profile ratings released next fall will reflect those observations. To dive into this data a little bit more, you'll see that results from class observations conducted in infant classrooms in the fall of 2019 show relatively high results on relational climate and teacher sensitivity, with lower results on facilitated exploration and early language support. This is going to be really important as leaders and teachers explore how to continue to increase the quality of children's experiences in early childhood care. The fall 2019 results of infant class observations suggest that of the nearly 600 sites with infant classrooms, as well as pre-K or toddler classrooms, the vast majority are positively impacted by the inclusion of infant class scores in the overall score. You'll see that almost 70% experienced an increase in their overall score as a result of the inclusion of infant scores. And about 30% experienced a smaller when compared to the score improvement decline in score. In addition to the quality of classrooms and of children's interactions in classrooms, another important aspect of the Unified Early Childhood Systems vision is expanded access. And this graph shows the access that children in different age groups have to high quality programs, those rated proficient or above, or as well as low quality programs, those rated unsatisfactory or approaching proficient. And while sites across the state continue to make impressive gains in class scores, there are still too few economically disadvantaged children who can access publicly funded high quality early childhood programs, especially infants, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, and 3-year-olds. To disaggregate this data a little bit, we want to present this graph. I think that this might show what these gaps in access might look like statewide. This table map provides insight into the percent of economically disadvantaged birth through 2-year-olds. And you can see from this that there are still far too few communities that provide economically disadvantaged families with children under 3 opportunities to roll in their publicly funded quality care centers. Additionally, it might be worth disaggregating this data as well, specifically for 3-year-olds. And while this data shows that a higher percentage of economically disadvantaged 3-year-olds are served, the gaps across the state remain. I'm going to pass it back to Taylor to talk about how the state supports improvement.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, before we jump into this section, could we go back up a couple slides to the access to quality graph? I just want to make one point that sort of stuck out to me before we move on. One thing I see when I'm looking at this graph is that we are doing a really good job as a state of closing the gaps in terms of children enrolled in low quality programs. So if you look at infants, this bar on the left, you'll see that there are now 0% of infants served in a program that's rated below proficient. That is certainly something to celebrate, and that is something to get, very excited about. However, there are still 97% of economically disadvantaged infants that cannot access any publicly funded childcare at all. So while we are closing that gap such that there is more green compared to blue when you look at these 4 or 5 columns, we still have enormous gaps in terms of the number and percentage of economically disadvantaged children who can access the care at all, let alone high quality care. So I just wanted to point that out, that we are seeing that middle category shrink, but we are still seeing a very large gap for each of the age groups below 4 in the percentage of children in those age groups that are able to access care and education through public funds. Great, thank you. We can jump back down to 36. Awesome. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about some next steps and how we can continue to push improvement in classroom quality. So I'm hoping that by now most of what is on this slide is not news to you, but we do just want to remind you of some of the supports that sites and lead agencies can take advantage of this year to continue to drive improvement in classroom quality. So first is around curriculum. I want to remind you that childcare centers have access to the Childcare Curriculum Initiative, where they can be reimbursed for the purchase of a Tier 1 curriculum kit up to 80% of the cost. And center directors can access training on how to use and implement that curriculum through their CCR&Rs. Also, community networks, like last year, will be invited to apply for Circle or CLSD funds to support the use of high quality curriculum in birth through 5-year-old classrooms in Super App. I am getting a little bit of background noise, so if you are not muted, can you please mute yourself? Thank you so much. Then the next category of supports is around PD and coaching. So we also want to remind you that the Louisiana Leaders Academy is a year-long program that builds instructional leadership knowledge and skills of specifically Type 3 center directors through executive learning. So if you'd like to learn more about that or interested in joining the next year's cohort of the Louisiana Leaders Academy, we certainly encourage you to explore that and learn about that opportunity. Of course, through your resource and referral agencies and mental health consultation, Type 3 childcare centers can access targeted coaching that's responsive to their class scores. Other supports that we're not naming here may also be available through your community network. So we do also encourage that you reach out to your early childhood lead agency in your community network to learn about other opportunities that may be available. And then lastly, I just want to remind you that now there is a requirement that lead teachers in Type 3 childcare centers have their ancillary certificate within 20 months of hire as a lead teacher. And then if you're interested in learning about the BESE approved ancillary certificate programs, there will be a link in this slide here when we send out these slides. I also want to make a note about our site improvement planning process. So for the last couple of years, sites that scored below 3.75 in the previous year's Unified Quality Rating System results were required to participate in a year-long site improvement planning process with department staff. This year, in August of 2020, 58 of these low-performing sites were contacted regarding either their mandatory or recommended participation in this process for 2019-2020, based on 2019-2020, I should say, for the 2020-2021 school year. So if you were one of those sites, you would have already received notification regarding the beginning of that process. And 12 sites were mandated to participate this year, and 46 sites were recommended. And really that we have seen tremendous success with this site improvement planning process. So sites that do participate in this site improvement planning process are assigned a field support consultant at the beginning of the school year. And that field support consultant works closely with the site director to develop a very targeted improvement plan based on the individualized needs and self-assessment results of the site. And then these sites that participate in site improvement planning are also prioritized for other supports and resources, such as coaching through their CCR&R, curriculum support, and mental health consultation. And we have seen the sites that do participate in this process really show dramatic improvement over the course of the last couple of years. Great, so now we'll talk a little bit about next steps, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time left over to answer some questions. So for those of you who have been doing this a few years, you likely know the drill when it comes to performance profile release. But for new sites out there, or for any sites that are trying to better understand how to interpret your results, we did want to make you aware of some various different resources. So we would, of course, recommend that tomorrow, when the performance profile results are released on School Finder, that you visit School Finder and you take a look at your site's performance profile information. If you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at earlychildhood@la.gov. Then also, we have resources to help you understand and interpret the results on School Finder. So we have released a site performance profile key and guide. Also, we've released performance profile FAQs, which is a fairly technical document that really goes into the details of how performance profile results are calculated. This year, we've also released a COVID-19 performance profile FAQ document. It's very brief. It's a one-pager that just walks through essentially what we described earlier, the hold harmless approach and how results were calculated, in case that's helpful to you. And then there is a performance profile calculator on the department's website that's linked here. And you can actually go into the class portal if you're a site administrator in the class portal and download reports either from the year that we're in now or previous years, and use that performance profile calculator to calculate what your score would be based on those results. So you can do that for historical results. You can also do that moving forward as class observations happen in the future. You can sort of check those class observations with this performance profile calculator tool to get a sense of what score your site's on track to make for the current year. We would also recommend that you reflect on the results from class observations last year and try to understand both your site's specific strengths. So what are the dimensions and domains of the class tool that your site is really excelling in? And then additionally, what are the domains and dimensions of the class tool that your site may need to make improvement in? And then we would recommend you start thinking about how you could begin to be driving improvement in those areas. As a guide for this, we have a document called 5 Tips for Sites that may be helpful, especially if you were just sort of starting to begin this work. We'd also recommend that you think about how to share the results with teachers, with your community generally speaking, with families. We know this is a tough time in terms of enrollment. So if you're still under enrolled, we would recommend that you use the results tomorrow to sort of advertise the quality of your center and really encourage families to start sending their kids back to childcare. And we do have a toolkit around hosting a family night and really making sense of these results and communicating these results, generally speaking, to a public audience. So we'll make that available for you as well. And then I just want to note a couple next steps for community networks as well, for the lead agencies on the line today. Upcoming things that you all should be thinking about and thinking how you will incorporate these performance profile results into your planning process for. One is Super App. Super App will be released, like in previous years, in November and due in February. And as part of that Super App process, you will be submitting a blueprint with goals and strategies for improving quality and expanding access. You'll also be making a coordinated funding request for seats. You will also be requesting funding to support classroom quality. So these results from the performance profile release should be used as part of the set of data and information you use to make decisions about what you submit and apply for in Super App. And then, of course, we would always like to plug Ready Start networks. If you're a lead agency that is not yet a Ready Start network, we would encourage you to consider to apply for the next round of Ready Start networks. That application will be released at some point in spring of 2021. And we'll have more information for you as that date nears. Okay, one quick announcement unrelated to the performance profile results, but we do just want to make sure that we get this out there and that any sites that are on the line today are able to give this information to their families. You can go on to the next slide. The Department of Education is partnering with the Policy Institute for Children and United Way of Southeast Louisiana to release a parent survey called the Louisiana Child Care Parent Poll. So this is a link, and I'm actually gonna drop it into the chat box, and then Bach, if you could send it out as the host, that would be great. If directors or lead agencies on the call today would share this link with families that they work with, either families of children in their centers or families that they know in the community that might be seeking childcare, that might not be able to afford childcare or find a publicly funded option. We really encourage that you get the word out about this survey. It will be used by policymakers, advocates, etc., to really understand the landscape of childcare in the state and how childcare has been impacted by COVID-19 from a family perspective, which is a perspective that we have not really seen a lot of data on yet in Louisiana. So please, please, please get the word out about this parent poll. We're extremely excited about it, and we think this is a real opportunity for families' voices to be heard. If you have any questions about this survey, please contact the Policy Institute at info@policyinstitutela.org, or on our team, you can contact Amanda Colin. Okay, with that, I believe that is all the content that we have today. I want to pause for a second and see if there are any questions in the chat box that we can answer. So hang on for 1 second and we'll see about answering some of these questions.
Yeah, so a couple questions coming in, and one is whether there'll be early childhood honor roll this year. Do you want to talk about this one, Taylor, or should I?
I can talk about it a little bit. We will not be releasing an early childhood honor roll this year, unfortunately. And that is consistent with K-12. K-12 is also not releasing any sort of honor roll for schools. And really so much of our honor rolls recognize improvement. And because of our hold harmless approach, we felt that it sort of muddied the water a little bit in terms of recognizing the most outstanding sites in the state. We really want to ensure that those honor rolls in future years be reserved for the most high achievers, the sites that are making the greatest gains from one year to the next. So we will not, unfortunately, because of the limited data this year, be releasing honor rolls.
Another question in the chat from Pam Crook. She asks if networks will receive an overall score. And this year, because of the disruptions with COVID-19 and spring semesters, the fluctuations in attendance, as well as the number of centers that experience temporary closures, every network in the state meets the qualifications or the designation requirements to be a severe impact community network. And so, consistent with Bulletin 140, the department is going to extend 2018-2019 network scores and ratings and profiles for the upcoming year. This is also really similar to what's happening in K-12. Final question that I am seeing, and there might be a few just coming in, is how to obtain a copy of these slides.
Yeah, I think we are going to send out a special edition newsletter tomorrow with an update when the results are live in School Finder. We will, in that newsletter, link to these slides in a PDF form so that you can download the slides and review them. We'll also be sharing this recording if there's anyone that would like to listen back to the recording or share with other folks. We will have both the slides available there and the recording to this webinar.
Awesome. Another question about the application period for the curriculum purchase grant and when that will begin.
That's a great question. I am wondering if Meredith or Leslie is on the call and they can answer that question.
Hi, I'm on the call. Bot, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, could you talk more asking about, the question is asking about the comments are scrolling really fast, the timeline for the curriculum purchase grant.
Right, so the curriculum application, you can submit purchases from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th of 2021. And I think it was open on EGMS earlier this week for our CCR&Rs to put in reimbursement requests.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Leslie.
Great. Another question about when performance profiles will be published on School Finder. And the answer to that is that we're expecting them to be updated tomorrow morning.
Yep, I believe it's scheduled for 7 a.m., y'all. So if you want to get up super early and catch the results, they should be live at 7 a.m. And we'll send out that special edition newsletter sometime in the morning as well, announcing those results have gone live.
Awesome. I am, as I'm sort of scrolling through the chat, I know that I've missed a few, but it looks like I'm gonna have to do a little bit more scrolling. I think at this point, it might make the most sense if I'll go back and I'll reach back out to folks individually if we didn't get a chance to get to your question. If you're in that bucket, please don't hesitate to also put an email address or a phone number that would be easiest to follow up with you into the chat box. And I'll make sure that we follow up with you one-on-one. Super sorry, I think that sometimes these chat features for me get just a touch overwhelming.
Great. Well, I just want to say, finally, we're so grateful for all of you. We know that this is a crazy year. Many sites in the state have been both impacted by COVID-19 and a devastating hurricane. And we are just so grateful for the work that you all continue to do and for the quality of care that you continue to offer our your young children in Louisiana. So thank you so much for joining us today. And as Bach said, please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions at all.
All right. Take care, y'all. Have a great rest of your afternoon.